A rundown of my system here. So this all started really when I think I just bought a 12 volt solar panel, my little one, at JCar one day, thinking, oh yeah, I'll be able to just use that to charge my phone or something, not realising all the other hassles that sort of come along with that, but I'll get to that in a moment. So I thought I'd just start with the charge controller. So the charge controller is this, obviously, and they come in all different types. This one is the 5, stands for 5 amps. So the solar input, the charge rate and the load output are limited to 5 amps. So if I wanted to run anything more than 60 watts off the battery, I'd have to connect it to the battery directly instead of running it through the charge controller. At the moment, don't have anything that beefy, so it doesn't really matter. But like if I connected an inverter to it, for instance, the smallest inverters you can get are like 150 watts, so I'd be connecting it directly to the battery. But this one also has a solar output. The 12 volt refers to you can only take 12 volt systems, but you can get some which are 24 and the fancy ones are 48, 72, whatever, which helps reduce your transmission loss. The reason I stuck with 12 volts is, well, I guess price more than anything, but also that most of the little things I'm using to like charge USBs and all this sort of thing, they work on a voltage range from 9 volts to like 15, 16, so the sort of the whole range that a 12 volt battery would output or charge at. They're not designed to run on like 24 volts, so for this sort of hobby stuff you're sort of limited to 12 volts. Anyway, so I have, you can see I've put switches in, so it's a switch to my battery. Also this system's fused to 5 amps, so if it sees more than 5 amps it'll shut down. So I've also got a 10 amp fuse, it's just in here. So I can't draw any more out of the battery than 10 amps. Just another backup. So yeah, so I put these switches in so I can disconnect everything. And so if the weather's really bad for ages, I can turn the battery off and not have the charge controller parasitically losing any energy while it's sort of sitting there, not actually contributing to the battery energy. And this one just disconnects the solar panel, and so I've got this plug here which leads to a big lead, goes outside, a cable that I made up. So all these connectors I've made up myself. They're pretty easy, you can buy them off eBay. They're sort of rated for 13 amps, so I've got a bit of margin there. Anyway, so this cable goes outside on top of the water cylinder. Now I did originally have the solar panels up on the roof of the garage, and the small panel was quite happy up there for quite a while. And then when I got the bigger panel and tried to put it up there, I was just too worried about wind pulling it down, so it's not quite as convenient up here. It doesn't get quite as much sun on the hot water cylinder, but it's pretty good, and nothing seems to blow away yet, so that's a good sign. It's a bit cloudy today, but the battery's still pretty well charged, so I'm not too worried. So the panels will output at more than 12 volts, and the solar charge controller just limits the charging of the battery so the battery doesn't go overcharge. I presume you know a lot of this stuff, but I thought I'd just go over it again just in case you didn't. So if the panel's just disconnected and running by itself, they'll like sit at 20, like over 20 volts. But they sort of need that voltage buffer to be able to actually fill up a battery that might be up to, you know, they normally charge, they have to be able to charge batteries at 14.2 volts typically, or 14.4 depending on what your system is. This little LED I added in myself separately, so it's just soldered into the battery leads here. And that's just the lead to the big battery there, and this is my load. So the load is switchable by this button on off, and So what I did, you probably saw the photos on Facebook, but I have this connected up to my little junction box here, which I did this myself, but it wasn't too hard to do. And so I've just got these USB, they are banana plugs, and these are fancy like banana plugs so that they're fully insulated so you can't accidentally knock them. These other ones here aren't, so if you could actually accidentally slip a screwdriver in there, and if you accidentally connected the positive and negative terminals together, you'd get a short circuit across the battery. But of course that's limited by the fuse on the battery, so that would pop if it was pulling more than 10 amps, but the charge controller should pop first because that's limited at 5 amps. But I've also got this fuse here which is also 5 amps. So I can't pull any more than 5 amps at 12 volts out of here. But because most of the stuff I do is actually step down to 5 volts anyway, through buck regulators, which are pretty efficient, they're about 90% efficient, you can pull, more like probably a bit over double that, so a bit over 10 amps at 5 volts. Of course, I don't even get to that. So at the moment, this is one of the first things I bought. It's a pseudo car cigarette lighter socket, and so you can plug in like your generic things that you buy for charging phones in your car. So there's a 12 volt, well, it's actually 9 to 15 volt to 5 volt USB adapter. And so you can charge it, so I use it in the car sometimes, but it's also got a 2.1 amp output, which I use for charging Carla's iPads. That's actually charging at the moment. The other things I've got is, this thing is a little switching regulator that converts from 12 volt to 5 volt. It's only got 3 pins on it, and that's only limited to 1 amp, so I can charge my phone on that. Actually, the way phones work, my Motorola, it'll charge at a little bit over 1 amp, but if the data pins are open circuit, which I've got the switch controlling, the 2 data pins in a USB socket, if they are linked together, so short circuited, it'll charge at full rate, so it thinks it's charging off AC, and so it'll pull a bit over 1 amp. Of course, if you're doing it off this, it's limited to about 1 amp. But if you have it open circuit, it thinks it's just charging off a USB port, and in that case, it will limit its current draw to 500 milliamps, which means that it sort of charges the phone. It's a bit easier on the phone battery. The phone battery doesn't get hot. It's also like easier on the battery I'm charging it from, so doesn't pull quite as much current. So if I'm charging something overnight, I'll often charge it on there at 500 milliamps instead of an amp. And this is the old battery, and so I can actually charge the old battery by putting this into my junction box and charging it off the charge controller and the large battery. So what other things have I got? So also in here, off my not quite so good terminals, is the lights I've got going up here. So these are the cords for the light, and I've actually got a whole lot of different connectors. I've actually got up to 10 of these different connectors that you can plug MR16 type lamps into. So turn that on, and so I can sort of light up this end of the garage anyway, just with these lights. It's just another thing to have. You can see the voltage is responding to that quite well. But yes, so they're the main things I've got. So I've got several things to charge USB devices. I've actually got other separate USB modules you can buy off eBay that'll charge up to 3 amps. I've got them sitting in a box, which I haven't hooked up yet because I'm waiting on some heat sinks to arrive, because they get pretty hot when I'm running them. I've also got a 5 amp USB board coming, and I'm waiting for that to arrive because I think that'll be more efficient at charging the iPad than this, because this gets pretty warm when it's in use, and that's implying that it's not incredibly efficient. So I was thinking if I can get something a bit more powerful, or larger componentry anyway, it'll make it more efficient. But yeah, so you can see it's not really practical to, like, well, this battery is almost as big as a car battery. In fact, it's bigger than the car battery in my Clio, but probably a bigger car would have a battery maybe about that size, but it's a pretty decent battery. But yeah, so it's all totally standalone. So, you know, actually the power went out last night briefly, but which was odd, doesn't normally happen. But, you know, we've had power go out for quite a while before in storms, and it would be useful to have like extra lighting inside, because you're running around for about 4 days this one time with torches and stuff inside. But you can see, because it's all so standalone, it's useful for hobbyist stuff, but it's just not useful for powering any major appliances. So so with my big 40-watt solar panel, which is over here, they generate about 2.5 amps, so it's still only about half the capacity of the charge controller. But if I wanted to go to something like a 100-watt panel or a 250-watt panel, I'd have to get a bigger charge controller. Charge controllers are pretty cheap off eBay. I think this one was only about $20. Yeah, so the LEDs here are giving a state of charge indication, but obviously this is a lot more accurate. But the voltmeter also has a bit of a parasitic draw at night. I'm not too worried about it with the big battery. I could unplug it again via the plugs on the back there if I got annoyed with it, but it seems to be pretty good at the moment. So you can turn the load on and off by this button. It's a bit of a sticky button. You see the iPad's just gone on charge here, off charge here if I turn it back on. And it comes back on charge. And I've checked the outputs for the USBs with my voltmeter, and they're bang on 5 volts, even over quite a wide voltage range input. And the other thing would be the solar panel. So if I turn the solar panel switch off, yeah, not much change on the voltage today because it's not supplying much, but yeah, that would drop quite a bit normally. If we had the 40-watt panel plugged in today, it would probably be sitting up about 13.5, but it will go up to like 14.5 when it's charging at full rate and the battery's full for a couple of hours, and then it drops down to the float charge of the battery, which is about 13.8. Yeah, so it's just good fun, but the big deal is actually the battery chemistries. You've got to know lead acid batteries, what their voltages are meant to be charged at to allow, well, you've basically got to buy the right charge controller to charge at the correct voltages for your battery chemistry. Even this charge controller has 3 different settings. You can change the type of battery it's charging to, and it changes the voltages a little bit, but I still think the charge is probably too high for this battery. Sometimes it'll be sitting at 14.4 for quite a while, really, because the battery is so lightly loaded. It's really only meant to be charged to about 13.8 at any time if it's not heavily cycled. If it is heavily cycled, it can be charged to about 14.5 volts, but considering we charge it so lightly, discharge it so lightly. Anyway, you've got more upgrades coming, so I've got got LED strip lights coming that I'll probably have to wire them. Probably will have to wire them into the battery at this stage rather than the junction box, because they'll be drawing maybe 5 or 6 amps at 12 volts, so it'll be right on the borderline of my fusing. And so I've got a DC-DC converter so that I'll be able to turn down the voltage that the lights are seeing from the battery, and so I'll be able to adjust the brightness and also be able to reduce the amount of energy they're pulling, because it might just be a bit sort of too much. If it's if the battery is 13 volts and the lights are only meant to work at 12 volts, they're just going to be running that much brighter, and they'll pull the battery down more quickly, and they'll wear out more quickly and get hotter, and there'll also be more losses in the cabling, this sort of thing. Yeah, I said it's a bit of a brief rundown. I'm sure there are things I've forgotten to say, but yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. Hope this gives you some clues to what I've been doing. Cheers, mate.